everyone. Today we have a summit on futuristic leadership, and this is very, very important, especially for the youth and upcoming leaders. Already from Asia Pacific, many universities, think tank, different government officials, as well as different corporations, they will engage with World Talent Economy Forum soon. Well, we have 2 hours of the session. This is our first sessions. We will discuss on these futuristic leaderships. We have our honorable speakers from around the world. We have our speakers from India, Madam Durga Das, Ali Rice from UK, Mr. Rob from USA, Professor Zainul from International Islamic University, Malaysia, Professor Edward from USA, Professor David from USA. So I want to start our presentation and question answers sessions. So hopefully it will be very, very effective for everyone. Even after this session, we will heavily promote these things with all of our important organizations in Asia Pacific. So by this way, I think we can develop our collaborations, and this way we can learn from each other. So I want to start from Madam Durga Das, and thank you for joining today. I know that you have your presentation, so thank you.
So I believe I already shared it. Can you not see it? Sorry.
No.
Let me try it again. Let me try to share it again.
No problem. Take your time. Thank you. We have our new speaker, Dr. Babur Afzal, also joined with us. So,
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Sharif, once again for having me on the show. Today is a topic that's pretty close to my heart. It's something I've tried to do effectively for the last 38 years. And when I started out, I was just but a kid, and I was 15, 16 years old, and I started an ad agency when I was 17, and I had people who were 30, 40 years old, I mean like 25 years older than me working for me. And I always thought I was a great leader. And eventually, at some point, I realized that I wouldn't know what it means to lead unless I was being led at some point. So I would need to know what it was to be on the other side of the fence. And so I did take a few opportunities where I worked for other organizations, and then I learned one fundamental thing, that great leaders lead from the front, but the best of them lead or push from behind. And that's what I learned through the process of 38 years of trying to be an entrepreneur, trying to build organizations, and trying to lead, whether it was on the sports field playing cricket and leading, I don't know, the US team with 10 different cultures under me, or running a company. So this is a topic pretty close to my heart. I put this together in the last few minutes, so forgive me if it isn't spot on, but I'll try. Leadership has been fundamentally questioned, or fundamentally, at least the questions that have been put in front of leadership because of COVID in the last 15 months has been incredible. I think these are times that we did not expect, at least not in our generation. I think in the past, there have been moments when leaders were faced with challenge and change, and were, also put through similar tasks. And there's something in history, if you go back and understand how they faced it, what they did, how they combated it, and how they still managed to thrive, is something we could probably bring back to use today. Most of us feel that we are in control of, or at least till COVID happened, we all thought we were in control of everything, right? But no one really knew, because we were living in a bubble of status quo, thinking we knew what happened and what we intend to happen. And those are the ways we learn to, build our organizations or to lead our teams. But I think COVID, which was not a singular geographic event, but an event that transformed the entire world, every nation, every demography, whether you were rich or poor, it didn't matter. How much money you had, it didn't have. It was going to attack you the same way. There are more people I know with tons of money who died, and there are people who had nothing who probably fought it. So, this is a moment when I think there's a way to make our minds change, to think differently, and I think it's an opportunity, if you really ask me. We used to build our relationship because we were able to meet people. When I was in India and I'm building businesses here, the Indian culture was very much like the Japanese or the Asian culture. We network by meeting people. When I was in the US, there were salespeople who were mowing their garden and picking up a phone and saying, yeah, I got your order. I think of the 20 odd years that I was driving sales, meeting customers, doing business development in the US, I must have met out of 1,000 customers that I've interacted with, 1,000 companies I interacted with, maybe I met like 100 of them, totally in 25 years. But everything was on a phone, it was over the net. That was an acceptable or okay. But it wasn't so here in Asia, where we built relationships and we learned to connect frequently. COVID, I think, has kind of put all of that on an even platform for everybody, whether you're in the West or the East. Now we got to figure out, how do we make those connections happen? How do we build on those relationships? Now, would the West be in a far better position because that's what they were already being used to, doing business over the net? But then there is a lethargy to it. There's a disconnect that happens now that COVID has happened. People want to get to meet people. People who are saying, I don't want to be stuck at home anymore. I don't want to be stuck in the office anymore. And here in the East, where we used to meet people, it's a complete disconnect. So how do we do business anymore? And how do we build these relationships? It's a big question to ask. And this is a question not only for leaders to lead their teams, but also to build that kind of interaction and connection within our teams. Some of the things that we need to do as leaders to make a change, I think, are the ability to adapt quickly. We need more range, maybe less depth. We need to be able to do multiple things, right? And we need to learn. We need to be in the position to say, I'm learning. I need to constantly learn. I need to constantly innovate. I have to be able to quickly pivot and think of what's next, because I don't think COVID-19 is the end. It's the beginning of teaching us how to adapt very, very quickly. And when I say adapt quickly, I remember doing business in 1985. I didn't have a computer. I think I barely had a typewriter. We didn't have a phone. But I learned to do a retail business. But in my own lifetime, I have, including my mother, who calls me on the cell phone and says, well, I call you 10 times, and it's probably in a matter of 5 minutes, meaning she expects an immediate answer. So if my mother even expects that immediate answer, I mean, my customer does, my teammate does, my colleague does. So that change in the way we've interacted and dealt with each other is tremendous. And in such a fast-moving world, if you're hit with something as strong as a COVID situation, we have to learn how to quickly adapt, quickly change, quickly pivot, and learn to keep our heads above water and survive. And this is something we have to teach not just ourselves, but down the line. Everybody in the team has to learn to be adaptive, right? We need to multitask. We need to learn to do different things. At one time I was playing cricket for the country. I was playing the golf circuit. I sailed competitively. I was running a business. I do social work. And someone said, how do you do it all? I said, I only do one thing at a time. They said, no, but you do all these things. I said, yeah, I do many things, but my focus on that one thing at the time I'm doing it is so 100% that's all the time I need. When you don't focus, then the thing that takes you 10 minutes could take you 10 hours. So we have to learn to have razor-sharp focus on whatever we do. And this is something within our teams that we have to inculcate as well. One of the ways I do it is meditation, but then, hey, everyone has a certain way of building focus. It could be running, it could be exercise, it could be yoga, anything that helps me build my focus and strengthen my attention on the job at hand. The little cartoon out there from the movie says it's a very important task I have, and then someone says squirrel, and the dog starts running, right? So our attention is so fleeting. That's why we tend to take so much more time. But again, in this fast-paced world where we have to be nimble and agile, it's very important to build this one strength of focused attention. Of course, the other couple of things that I think that are critical are lateral thinking, interdependence, and systems thinking. And what I mean by that is, what I mean by lateral thinking is we need to be able to become creative. We need to think like children again. right? So when COVID happened, and I make machines that make water from air, and then we're stuck. We have a supply chain problem. I can't get my machines out to customers. And then I realized when I make water from air, the first thing I then make is distilled water, and then I mineralize it. Every hospital needs oxygen concentrators. They need oxygen for survival for these COVID patients, but they're using regular water, which is leading to surviving COVID and then dying of multifungus or whatever they call that new disease now, right? And I said that's because of bad water. So can I produce my machines to give them the distilled water they need? And once COVID is taken care of, maybe they can get drinking water. So thinking on our feet, being creative is so much important. And I think being a child really helps. Interdependence. We need to think advanced collaboration. We really need to figure out how to extend our network. I think one of the things that has helped me as a leader survive and keep my company alive in these very, very difficult and dark times, when I see so many people shutting around me, is the ability to open my Rolodex and see that I have a network of contacts around the world. And somewhere or the other, there's an ability to learn more, interact more, maybe find a new customer, or find a way to integrate and collaborate so we come up with a new solution. So I think collaboration is going to be extremely critical for the future leader. And of course, we need to understand that everything is interconnected nowadays. We said this and was almost a cliche online because of internet. But I think COVID has now made us realize that it's not just the internet and that has made us interconnected, right? It is pandemics. It's like chaotic situations like this that make me realize that what I do impacts somebody that I'm not even aware of, like 7 stages away. And similarly, what they do is impacting me. One of the things I learned from my father when I was maybe 10 or 12, when I learned to drive in India, and if anyone has been to India and on our roads, you'll know what I'm talking about, was he said, you got to think for all the 10 fools on the road, don't tell me you're a good driver. And he used to ask me this thing, can you see and tell me the registration of the vehicle that's 6 vehicles in front of you? I was like, oh, why would I need to see 6 vehicles in front? He said, well, that's the fool who's going to jam his brake because he's not focused. And everyone behind him is going to do something that you're not prepared for. So you need to think that far ahead. You need to understand that every one of you is connected on these roads. And when I mean these roads, I'm talking about the road of life, of business. And of course, before the pandemic, we really didn't think about online meetings the way we think now. But right now it's about, okay, we're all online and we're all getting tired. My own Rotary Club, where I'm becoming the president next month, I'm thinking, well, whole 14 months we've been doing this online. How do I keep my members engaged? How do we do projects together? How do I keep them motivated to remain members to do good work for society? And I said, well, I need to change this platform. I can't be using Zoom anymore. I got to do something different. I got to make this entertaining. So we got to figure out how to change the way our workplace functions, figure out how to make it more interesting, creative, work a way to mentor one another, keep everyone engaged all the time. And that's going to take a big toll on leadership. So it would probably be wise to create a second level of very strong leaders who can, take isolated groups and have focused attention on mentoring and leading, because it can't be as, functionally set as it used to be in our organization charts before. I think we got to think of reorging a little bit so that there's a little more depth in our organization chart and in isolated groups, and then bringing them all back together. I think that's an important requirement for leaders of the future. We have a chance to change, right? And it's what people call the new normal. We were used to something, but now what is important is, it's not just about serving others. It's about surviving and serving. Our ambitions and goals have to also change with part of this. It's not about just making the next buck, but keeping our organizations alive. I keep mine alive, even though I could be retired, because I have 20 people whose lives, whose families depend on me, and I need to be keeping this going for them. It's not just for me. And those 20 families in turn have so many others depending on them. So there is this whole level of dependency that's starting from me. So I have to think differently as a leader about why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I'm building and what it's going to do to make a difference in the future. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Durgadash. From our speakers, if you have any questions to Madam Durgadash, you can ask. Anybody has any questions? Dr. Edward or Professor David? Yes.
Ed, you're muted.
Anyone has any question? I have specific questions to Madam Durgadash as we are discussing on futuristic
Other than
leadership.
other than that, she did a very good job. Excellent presentation. That is my comment.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much. I was a little
Thank you.
nervous because I had like a few minutes to put something together. So sorry about that.
Absolutely, absolutely excellent.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda, for joining. Professor David, Professor Rob, do you have any questions? Or Professor Jainul?
No, I agree. It was
to
very
Madam.
nicely done.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Okay. I have a question to Madam Durgadash. My question is that as we are discussing about futuristic leaderships, and we need to more focus on leadership, specifically in South Asia, even in India, what do you think? What will be the role model of the future leaders according to Indian cultures or South Asian cultures? What you expect at present pandemic situation?
You know, interestingly, I've been back in India and building teams now, let's say the last 6-7 years, right? And India has typically been a place where multitasking is part of the norm. We kind of do many things at the same time because that's just how the society is built, right? There's a lot of responsibility at various stages, whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't really matter. But we do many things and we're supposed to be great at all of them. We don't have these isolated families. So let's say I was a son in the family. I live with my parents, and then I probably live in a joint family with I have my uncles and then my cousins, and then I have work, and then I have a wife and I have kids. So you're actually on call multitasking your different roles, just like women do as well in India. So maybe it was a good thing because we kind of trained that way. But for the last so many years, people have changed because of we've been following the West to say, you know, you need to pick one thing to focus on, and that's all you're going to do. And you need to go really deep, and you need to go, you need to create depth. And I think that has to change to going back to where Indians were, where there was more range and less depth, because range allows you to jump from, one role to another really quickly. And that's important to have this creative mindset to be able to problem solve, to handle panic situations. And these are those times. So I think that range is so much more important. So we kind of have to relearn what we used to be many, many years ago. So I think that's what's important.
Thank you. I have another questions to you. This is my last questions. Like, what do you think at present pandemic situation, specifically the political leaders, those who are handle the pandemic situation because they have all of the authority and power, they can manage these things in like properly, or how they can manage it with
I've
their
always been a political Sharif, but you're putting me on the spot. But I'll be honest, I think it's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of hope in the current leadership here in India. And the hope was that he was, future thinking. He was going to bring transformation at various levels. He was going to make us a more transparent country, both from a business point of view as well as within the country, as a people. And I think a lot of it, as it seems to me, has been a lot of staging, a lot of driven towards being almost dictatorship oriented. Right. And maybe I've always thought a benevolent dictator is good for any organization, because you need to sometimes be that person to make change happen. But I think we carried it a little bit too far with the current political system here. And it went to a point where none of the things that were implemented really worked for the people at large. You take demonetization, it was a mess. You take the GST, it's implemented terribly. All the small, medium businesses are hurt. Demonetization killed the middle class and the lower middle class. And now with COVID, we could have just been, I think, frankly honest about the real depth of, where we were in terms of cases and deaths. And that has been completely misrepresented. And I think that has really hit us hard in the the second wave. We were the benefactors to the world in providing the vaccines right up front, but we couldn't take care of our own. And that for me is poor leadership. I really think leadership needs to start from, around us, take care of what's around us, immediately around us, and then of course extend that to the larger community and then to the world at large. But we were so fixed on presenting the right image to the world that we forgot about taking care of ourselves, and our own people. And I think that's a bit of a mess, and it's going to probably hit this leadership quite badly. But also, I think there is no strong competitor in the wings, so we might still end up with the same. But it is the situation, and this is the honest truth of what's happening here.
Thank you. For this summit, actually, we are also inviting different political leaders, even from USA. Yes, I think second half they will join, like senators from USA and other countries. So thank you. It's really great sessions. Now I want to request Professor Dr. Jainul from Malaysia. Definitely, Malaysian view is very important for us. We are launching our program from Malaysia, and I always get a lot of questions from around the world, what's going on. But I think you are the professor, you can give us some guidelines, specifically futuristic leaderships and what's the process going on inside Malaysia. Professor Jainul. Thank you, Professor Paul, joining with us.
Okay, I hope I got my screen on, Sharif.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone from this side of the world. We just been told that tomorrow, day after tomorrow, the lockdown will start again for the third sessions. So that's the news from Malaysia. So we better be prepared for that. Durga, that's very interesting. But I'll build up on that, the qualities of leadership that we are expecting to train and to inculcate among our students. I mean, at least on my context. But I'll be focusing more of the scenarios, the futures that we are preparing the leadership qualities for. Because it depends. To me, my argument is that it depends on how do you define the scenarios, how do you define the futures, and whose futures are we talking about? Is there such thing of universal futures and etc.? And I'm coming from the background of the center that I'm in, Sustainability Center for Humanity, and also from the chair that we just got from UNESCO Chair in Future Studies, Anticipation for Sustainability and Wellbeing. I would like to push on an argument that we need to bring back that soul. We need to bring back the spirituality, the ethics and morality in whatever futures that we talk about. And that will be the fundamentals that we need to be sure that all the leaders must have this. Otherwise, we will go back to the same cycle that we had gone before that bring us to COVID and other aspects as well. We know very well that these are the 5 things that have been talked about, especially during the World Economic Forum. These are the topic that has been highlighted, that seems to be dominating the discourse, whether we talk about the current or we talk about the future. Especially what I like to highlight is global warming. And then the fourth one, accommodating growth of developing economies and completing the convergence. And the last one, inequality. Why do I highlight this? Because I want to bring the human aspect of it. Yeah, how the economics has somehow affect a lot of the qualities of the leaders that we have. This is what global warming is referred to, and part of it, and then the kind of inequality that is being referred to, the scenarios that we're in, which used to be the youth future that we are referring to, 10, 15, 20 years back. And this is what we got. Looking at the future, looking at the development, industrialization, modernization that we have, this is the result that we have. Do we want to go back to that? So this is something that I would like highlight. And thank God, from the MDG they go to SDG. And this to me is the platforms to bring back the supposed futures that we should be having, rather than the youth future that has led us to the current conditions. So my argument here is that COVID has reset the condition, has reset and has put us a very big question that, do we want to go back to that kind of condition? Do we want to go back to that style of unsustainable development, the technologies that we are in? Which direction are we going? And then we decide on what is the kind of qualities that of the leaders that we want. Another quite common literature contributions from those who talks about future leaderships. These are the common expected trends that shape the future: AI, technology, pace of change, purpose and meaning, globalizations, new talent landscape. Sharif, this is what we're doing. Morality, ethics, and transparency. So people start to be talking more and more of morality, ethics, and transparency, and going back to that values. And that is why my argument is that let's bring back this kind of discourse to be the mainstream discourse. And this kind of qualities has to be the first one to be there if you talk about futures leadership. And nothing, this is another explanation of what we mean by unsustainable development. We are in the age of humans, Anthropocene, anthropogenic, whereby human will be seen as the most important actor now. And they are the ones also whether we want to take care of the environment or spoil the environment. And we know Stephen Hawking, to him, if we talk about anthropocentrism and artificial intelligence, this is the last thing should be done, but it's what's happening. We see the other side of the argument. Those are into very scientific and AI transhumanist kind of thing. This is the argument that they want to put up. And we've seen this, the impact and etc. from the movies that is being offered around. And I'll go quickly on this one. Just to highlight that from my perspective, or many others as well, I hope others would join this, would agree with me as well, that we know that technology has no ethics. We try very much. Some people have tried, get the robots, artificial intelligence things to read a lot of novels and etc. and see the kind of articulation, the kind of decision making that he has. So here, my next line of argument is that if we look back at all the 4 industrial revolutions that have come in, finally what we get is the thing that I showed just now, right? So now, again, my question is that what is the kind of future that we talk about? Are we following this trend, or do we want to change and disrupt the trend? And looks like definitely COVID has reset that. So we seriously got to think what kind of future that we want now. And that's why my argument here is that we must bring in that soul, we must bring in to look at a stronger perspective on ethical perspective, morality, and etc., which seen as a normative argument to many leaders. And this is what led us to our situation now. And this is what we got. Looking at the evolutions, and this is what happened. We are living with our laptop and etc. and handphone and all these Android etc. So what we want to argue for here is that we have to use all these technologies to reinvent humanity through technology. Not technology takes away the humanity component of us. And that's the other part of futures that I'm very concerned is that we know that our current economic model is inequality by design. The very usage of the word human capital is treating human being as human capital, as a capital. So you see the interesting literature which says that because of that economic theory, then the human being, when it's treated as human capital, then you will live and functions in that framework. So then we are now being assessed in the framework of economic metaphors as a technological change, risk, and etc. And then we will be KPI based on this. Our performance of that human being will then be tied very strongly, whether they're performing or not, depending on how much technology change they're being. So where is the component of humanity? Where is the component of a human being that must be there? And in the context of my university, even higher education, this is what's happening. What we see is that it's like a factory model. The students come in, we put in the exam and etc., assignment, etc., and at the end we want to make sure that they got the job, job employability, and that's what we see as the education factory. And what we produce is a robot. No more soul. I think it was one lecturer from Harvard, Harry Lewis, is talking about excellence without soul. So you can get 4 credit, 4A, but they may fall flat during serving to the community and a bit of discussions, a general discussion. They get very good technically, but when we talk about humanity, when we talk about compassion, it's not there. Because why? They are a product of the factory. So here at our university, this is what we talk about. Looking at very serious impact, the forge for resetting the educations after the COVID is pushing us to look back. The pre-COVID, we can see somehow illustrate that it's a model whereby the emphasis is on employment, looking at the mind to be very innovative, treating them as machine, putting all the high-tech component to them and make them ready to the market. But what we want to push for is that go towards 4H, the humanity component, to make sure that they've got the empathy through the heart, they got the high touch, and then finally to humanize, to really instill that values of humility. So moving from the 4M to the 4H, this is a kind of scenario that we want to move to. So because then based on this, then we hope that they will have the qualities that we want. Yeah, and to our side of our perspective, we are arguing that if we see it from the Eastern and the Western, here many of our universities is having an impression that all the universities in the West, all the universities in the developed countries are very advanced, are the one that is very best for their model. But what at least in my universities, we are arguing that indigenous knowledge plays a very important role now, especially under this COVID era. And then it cannot be just economic centric, and what more industrial led, which seems to be the functions of universities nowadays, and then this is a very interesting topic that we talk about reputation obsessed, meaning that ranking is the one that determines the positions of that university. People get into that university because they're the number 1, number 2, and number 3, regardless whether that university really educate you to be human, prepare you to serve the community, and lastly, dehumanizing all these discussions that takes in some universities in Malaysia, really taking away that soul component, that spirituality component away from the qualities of the graduate that we train. Where are we moving? We're moving to a wiser one. What do we mean by wiser? Is wholesome, inclusive, sustainability, equitable, and resilient. So this is the kind of like analogy that we want to move our students, our future leaders, towards these directions. And with that, we hope that we will be able to instill among them the kind of leadership qualities based on the word sejahtera. Sejahtera is a very local word that represents the meaning of well-being. So given our chair is chairs on future studies based on well-being and sustainability, so we are instilling this local concept of sustainable development, local concept of sustainability using our own local knowledge. So to be not just rhetorical, not just to be idealistic, this is our strategic direction. This is our detailed performance plan for universities. That the main one in the middle, you can see that after our exercise of future scenarios building that we undergo for 2 weeks, looking at what is the scenarios of that university, where are we going in 2040. So this is what we come up with: humanizing education through Maqasid Sharia and sustainable development. For those who are not familiar, Maqasid Sharia is the purpose, the very purpose of human existence, but it's an Arabic word that governs the Muslim when they are talking about the law. So that as a central functions, then surrounding it are all platforms and concepts that we thought will instill that kind of different, rather than we going back to the cycle that has led us to the current conditions. The kind of scenarios that we want to go to, the kind of future that we want to go to, must be based on this, right? So as a conclusion, what I'm trying to say here is that while we know that we are still struggling what kind of qualities, but I think what I'm trying to argue for here is the kind of future scenarios that we talk about, whether we want to go back to the condition that there is a used future that are making us in a current unsustainable condition, or we want to really disrupt the conditions as to how COVID is telling us, and how do we move forward. Okay, so that's all, Sharif, my presentation.
Thank you.
I hope I meet the 10 minutes or maybe a bit more.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. From our speakers, do you have any questions to
I do.
Professor? Yes.
With regard, there are a couple things that I picked out of the pitch. One of them is you had the singularity occurring in 2023. The earliest projection I've seen for singularity is 2040, and it's pretty optimistic. And post-human happening at the second half of the century. What causes you to move the singularity up so far as an event? Is there something that specifically has occurred that indicates we're going to get that man-machine combination far earlier than we thought?
Yeah, one thing that I see from there is that maybe because of our belief and convictions in the values that is losing very fast, the intensity of that humanity is gone already. The soul is gone already. That bring back us a bit faster rather than another 15, 20 years. So we thought that we are so far lost already in the what university is supposed to be. So that's my response to that, Rob.
So it's more of a virtual singularity than a physical singularity because we don't have the technology yet to truly combine the elements. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Then one other question you were talking about ethics and so what's your baseline on ethics? Because the issue with ethics typically is we can all talk about it. We all have a very different baseline. The ethics of somebody that's conservative versus somebody that's liberal are going to be different. The ethics of a dictatorship are going to be very different than the ethics in a democracy, a true democracy, if one exists. The advantage, of course, with regard to artificial intelligence and robotics, at least with them, whatever the ethics are, they'll be consistent. Where with humans, ethics are relatively variable depending on what position you have. So how do you set a baseline for ethics?
Yeah. To me, what I'm trying to argue for is that ethics is actually a universal language to us, while we actually referring to the role of religion and spirituality. So it goes back to religions. So
which one?
It's not okay. Islam. So from our side, being an Islamic university, an international Islamic university, so what we're referring to is from Muslim perspective, from Islamic perspective. But we want to speak the language that the others would understand and can continue to talk about it and debate about it. But here, the fundamental is that we are preaching, we are advocating for humanizing, bringing back the ethics by using the religions as the platforms.
Got it. But how are you going to reconcile the ethics of Islam versus the ethics of Christianity versus the ethics of Buddhism versus we've got relatively large populations that disagree on what the ethical core is. How do you resolve that?
And I would add to the question, Rob, is what I would call secular ethics, but ethics based on, for example, the insights of Aristotle, Cicero, a lot of the classic thinkers, which frankly I think work well with a lot of religions. A lot of religions endorse similar views about human nature, self-discipline, that sort of thing. So I would add that into your list.
Yeah. So my point is if we're gonna talk about ethics, I think we need to set a baseline. What ethics? Because everybody talks about it, and I agree, ethics are very important. But if you don't first set the baseline, then you don't really know what you mean by ethics. Anyway, just a thought, and I'm done.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think
this is the last question. Last question from Madam Durga, because we have other speakers. We need to give their time.
Question. Yes. I understand, and I'm going to not talk about the ethics of the religion because I kind of understand that you're coming from the Malaysian point of view, and Malaysia is a Islamic country, and it's about changing first things in your neighborhood, in your university, and then in your neighborhood, your community, your country, and then hopefully it will spread from there. So the attention is to see how industries in your country will change and humanize their business thinking. So from that point of view, changing from a very capitalistic mode into a social mode requires policy change, right? And it has to come from the highest echelons of government. And to make that policy change requires time. And time is something that we currently don't really have. And if we give people too much time, then we are pretty terrible as humans. I think we tend to forget. We die, we cry when someone is dead, and 3 weeks later we're out playing baseball, right? So we have a very short time span for dwelling in pain and in negative thinking. We're all looking after what next for myself. So too short a time, policy change ain't going to happen. Too long a time, industry is going to forget about the COVID situation and continue on the same path. So it's a fine line, and I'm just wondering, I just want to put a thought out there. I'm not sure you have the answer or not, but how do you intend to make that policy change happen in a timely manner?
There's no other way for that to us from our perspective. Is just accept to be transformational. And that's what we are using the strategies of, like, from WIT, whole institution transformations, to WCT, the whole community transformation. We know policy because we are government university. Yes, that's true. Where the autonomy is very, very limited, but we use the argument of COVID to be practical on this, to be tactical on this, is that COVID is pushing all the policy changes as well. So if you are not using this window, this is what we're telling the ministry, that if you're not using this window, you won't get it again. But I'm sure, Durga, this is a challenge there. But this is the only window that we have. If we don't change now, I think we won't get it anymore other time.
True. I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Professor Jainul, and for joining today's session. One thing I can share, because I have a chance to move different universities around the world. IIUM, I want to say, very diversified people from around the world. I think more than 70 countries, or more than that, people, they come and they do research, and they get a very good environment from International Islamic University, and debate and many intellectual activities they are doing. And especially, I am also from debating community. I saw that how they are performing. Even I know that my friends, so Sadiq Abdur Rahman, even the last government, he was youth minister. So IIUM produced many political leaders as well. So thank you, Professor, for joining today's session. This is a great session. Now, Professor Rob, yes.
Sure, and I'm going to be pretty brief because I've got a meeting that comes up in 14 minutes. No slides from me, so these will just be words. To do slides, I'll need 24 hours notice. Anyway. I'm going to approach this in two phases. One, the changes in leadership we're going to be needing to see over the next decade. And then second part will be on the disruptors in 2030 we're going to have to manage around as we think about the future. So first, with regard to changes in leadership, the skills that will be increasingly needed this decade are technology competency, particularly with regard to analytics and artificial intelligence, how to use it, how to not bias it, how to assure that the data you're getting and making decisions on is accurate and unbiased. That will be critical to leaders. As the pandemic has showcased, understanding how to use tele-everything. In other words, how do you do things that used to be done in person remotely? Initially, that's for safety. Eventually, that'll be with regard to time conservation and to a certain extent, just helping with work-life balance. Understanding scale. It's quite easy to look at a technology solution on an individual product or effort, but the ability for a leader, particularly top leader, to understand how that can spread and the overall impact at scale, particularly the consequential damages or impacts of anything that they implement. And as other speakers have pointed out, compassion is becoming a very important part of any leader. The companies, even the largest companies, are reporting that CS corporate responsibility efforts are having a multi-billion-dollar positive impact on sales. Money does drive behavior, and the compassionate leader right now is outperforming the more traditional money margin-focused leader, with the exception of Apple, who stands alone as an exception, maybe Oracle as well. They're going to need to know how to instrument employees. We're going to have employees that will remain remote. They're going to have to be instrumented mostly to assure work-life balance and timely retraining. The competent leader is going to know how to retrain and keep their workforce relevant without doing layoffs. Layoffs go back against that compassion requirement. It is really hard to be compassionate and also do large layoffs. The people that do layoffs well typically are not compassionate. That means they're not going to do well on the big stage. Environment. They're going to have fairly deep knowledge about environment. Politics is becoming a huge problem for executive management in particular everywhere, not only politics in their own country, but changing politics dynamically. They're going to have to understand what's going on, particularly with decoupling. The idea of bringing manufacturing in country that may have otherwise been out of country and making that work, or if it's out of country, how to secure it during times of change, because we're not done with this pandemic and we're not done with pandemics. And we'll undoubtedly have other problems with regard to climate change and political upheavals that will result in problems with supply chain. And what's going on with technology. What technologies can you trust and where can you trust them? One of them being quantum technology, which is a major disruptor. I'll talk about that in the 2030 timeframe. But you're going to begin to need competency in that area because that technology now is on a relatively fast track to reach quantum equivalence in the second half of this decade. Market, you're going to need to know not only the market now, but in the future. Managers today tend to be very tactical. That's problematic when you're talking about strategic change. So we have to get beyond the level of being unable to even spell strategy. They need to understand the future and be building towards it. As always, they have to understand product, both opportunity and threats. But one of the big threats is disruption. Entire markets are going to cease to be market segments, and understanding when that is and making sure you're not in it, or when to cash cow the segment and exit eloquently as opposed to terminally. And then finally, they're going to need to know how to manage agility. The future is not only uncertain, it's changing very rapidly. The future we were projecting just before the pandemic is a very different future than what we're projecting now. Over just a couple months, we have moved up almost every digital transformation metric that we've got by 5 years. That almost never happens. And so the rate of change is unprecedented, and agility will be critical. Now, moving to the second part, talking about 2030, the things that are going to be impacting the next decade that you need to start thinking about now is autonomy. Pretty much everything that's on wheels or in the air is going to have an autonomous element by 2030. We probably won't be at critical mass yet. We'll be still in the midst of transition. That's going to make huge differences in how we ship goods, how we transport people, and how we transport ourselves. Decoupling then in 2030 will have gone a full cycle. We will likely have a relatively large manufacturing capability brought back in country in the United States, and same with other large developed countries because of the impact of multiple pandemics. No way to stop that, but we're going to be facing a lot of inefficiency on a global scale as a result of decoupling, and how to manage that so you don't find yourself out of business because your supply chain is too expensive is going to be critical in that particular decade. AI will be a major decision enhancement tool in 2030. Those that have deployed and understand it will have significant competitive advantages over those that don't. We are talking about an AI pretty much on every executive's desk, and we're not talking Siri. We're talking more along the lines of the Watson assistant, where you're getting very real answers for everything from how your company is running to where the problems are that you need to focus. If you don't know how to use that, you're going to be out of step. Robotics have gone vertical. Delivery, manufacturing, driving, wherever we can automate, we're looking at automating at the moment. And understanding where that is and how that's going to impact your business now is going to make a big difference if you're around next decade. The new digital divide. Right now, we talk about the digital divide as to those that are connected and those that aren't connected. In most cases, we're going to have a lot more people connected in 2030. The problem is going to be access to AI and advanced analytics. Those people that have access to that stuff will be able to make better decisions faster on everything from how they invest to how they run their companies. That's why it's critical. In my earlier section, I mentioned you better understand analytics, because if you don't, you're going to be bypassed. I mentioned before, tell everything. By then, we really will not be traveling a whole heck of a lot, unless something is done significantly with regard to DNA editing so we can become resilient to pandemics and diseases. We're going to have a real problem traveling by 2030. So understanding and advancing this probably along the lines of virtual reality or mixed reality is going to be important. Another major disruptor is 3D printing. Right now, we're exploring it in manufacturing. We're doing point tools and typically replacement parts. But by 2030, we're going to have complex 3D printing, the ability to print plastics and metals and the same thing, and embed electronics. That's the projection, which means we're going to start turning factories into large 3D printers, which also means existing factories are probably going to be obsolete. Location of those factories is undoubtedly going to change, largely because of the changes in how we deliver and how we handle supply chain and the decoupling I mentioned earlier. Circular economy. If you're not into a circular economy by 2030, you're probably going to be sidetracked. The focus on pollution and containing your pollution is massive now. It's going to get far more massive as we get to 2030 and we start really working on problems like ocean plastics and ground pollution. ICE is probably going to be on life support. By ICE, I mean internal combustion engines. We're seeing every projection now indicating that by 2030, we'll be close to critical mass on electric cars, 2035 for autonomous vehicles. That means if you're investing in petrochemical, you're probably wise to short it, but we'll undoubtedly have hills and valleys as we get there and a lot of pushback. But in any case, it looks like ICE is pretty much gone in that decade. And then finally, human-machine balance. We're going to be talking an awful lot about human-machine balance in 2030. How do you connect and enable and enhance humans with machines versus how do you replace them? That's the dialogue we're having now. The impact of that dialogue in 2030 will be felt, and we'll need an understanding of how to do that better than we do today. That was just pretty much right on that for 10 minutes.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone has any questions to Professor Rob?
I'd like to ask one.
Anyone has? Yes.
Go, yeah.
I watched a film. I watched a documentary about artificial intelligence actually, and after watching it, there was basically two ways that we could go. So we could either go to a utopia or a dystopia or somewhere in between. And I just think going back to the humanity and the spirit, I think that the ethics and the decisions we make, even though there's lots of innovation, it feels like it's the same as the environmental kind of crisis that we've got as well. It feels like that's a juggernaut that no one could stop. And I think that the thing is that I've got a family and 2 children I want to have a good future for, and that's my concern. And as wonderful and innovative we are, it's even like the environmental crisis, as far as I can see, is the fact that we need to stop using fossil fuels, and the industries. It's stopping people doing what they're doing instead of looking at the industries that are spearheading those things. It's the big industry that needs to be tackled first, and it seems like all the other people have to carry the can for something that ultimately is being kind of. So it feels like, for me, governments are in bed with the petrochemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, all those big companies. And then the mass of people are given their narrative when, sometimes I don't necessarily believe that that's true. So where are we headed? Or is that kind of a decision that we're all going to make in the way that we live our lives and the choices we make? So
the way things kind of work when technology comes through is we all get excited about the technology. We all start to deploy it. Then we see the problems, and then we start thinking about fixing the problems. It's very chaotic, and we're in that chaotic period right now where we really don't.
That's a backward way to do it.
It is. We may argue it's not the way the world should work, but it just happens to be the way the world does work. So my job as an analyst isn't to talk about things that probably won't happen, but to talk about things that are happening and will happen based on current events. And sadly, we're just in that cycle where we're moving very rapidly with technology development. We are not yet really thinking about a lot of the consequences. We're dealing with a lot of the consequences from the development that's occurred over the last 50, 60 years. I mean, you mentioned petrochemical and climate change. There were reports back in 1920 and 1930 that indicated that petrochemical was going to be a nightmare, and that we should discontinue our efforts to develop it and go in a different direction. They were all suppressed by the then too powerful petrochemical industry, largely led by Shell Oil. And so 70 years later, we're now dealing with that mistake. Same problem we had with tobacco. We knew tobacco was bad decades before we did anything about it. It's sadly that's the way we work. Powerful industry can suppress critical information, and thus problems result. And we're in that phase right now. I'm not seeing so much suppression other than the layover stuff with regard to technology advancement, but undoubtedly we're going to begin seeing that as it becomes more pronounced. But we still have to deal with the problems regardless.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, a quick question.
Thank you.
Because we're talking about ethics, I'm not sure if you're familiar with or what your thoughts are on Max Moore's
Haven't read it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he did a piece on the philosophy of transhumanism, which very much comes from what I would call a classic sort of Aristotelian Enlightenment perspective. And he thinks transhumanism is simply the extension of the Enlightenment values into the future. So for those interested, it's a very interesting essay, I suggest.
Well, so when we talk about transhumanism, the concern is a lot of the underlying work I've seen with regard to singularity and transhumanism has actually, in terms of medical implementations, been going on in the military. And sadly, a lot of the stuff has to do with suppressing fear and suppressing emotions to make people more effective killers and fighters. It's not the way I'd want to go with regard to doing that in mass, because the result would be the mass suppression of humanity, and then we become robots. But that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of singularity, and it makes it very important we start thinking about the strategic impact of what it is we're doing, as opposed to just doing it and then hoping we can deal with the consequences.
Rob, one quick question.
Yeah,
I agree with you on so much stuff, but as you talked about 3D printers, you seem to believe that 3D printers will be in a new form of factory. My thought is that 3D printing will evolve to point of use manufacturing, much like we see on the ISS right now.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I just don't think it's going to happen by 2030. Getting the economies of scale down so that you can do it on a more individual basis. I mean, we're kind of doing that now with plastics, but I'm talking about being able to print a finished product. In other words, the replicator thing where you can say, hey, I want a radio, and the radio comes out of your wall. We're still a long way from that, but we're going to be at the point in 2030 that we'll be able to do it at large scale. So you'll be able to put an order into a factory, and much of that manufacturing will happen automatically with 3D printers. As they said, we're kind of already doing it with simple devices using plastics and now metals, but we'll have combined and actually the ability to embed electronics in the 2030 timeframe.
Well, as we begin to see graphene, as we've seen recently,
graphene is crazy.
It is advancing the point of use manufacturing through 3D dramatically, I believe.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say that's the one place I'm a little ahead of you on what we're seeing, but I love what you said.
Thank you.
Rob, I just have one question for you. Seeing that we're talking about futurist leaders.
Just 1 minute, just give me 30 seconds. This is last questions, and we have other speakers. Actually, they are waiting. So those who finish today's presentation, we will provide our certifications. We will send you email. So those who finish presentation, like Professor Rob said, he will leave early, so they can leave. Then we can give a chance to other speakers. There are many speakers actually waiting. So sorry about that. This is last question.
Okay, that's fine. Seeing that we're talking about futurist leaders, and we're talking a whole lot about technology and how it is rapidly changing. And obviously that means in my head that this needs to be taken into consideration when we appoint leaders in governments, in corporates, and all of that. Now, what would be your advice to people that are in politics? Because I mean, it is politics that deploy these leaders for us, and you end up having somebody who has no clue what technology has got to offer, or is not even interested in that because their head is just cemented in politics. What would be your advice to people or to politicians in terms of making sure that they do not run ahead of technology, or technology doesn't run ahead of them, and to ensure that this is incorporated in the way they lead going forward?
Well, so politicians tend to be elected on personality, not on capability. So which is sad. It really should be the exact reverse. We should be looking for competence as opposed to personality. But it's once again, it's the way the world is, not the way the world I'd like it to be. So if I'm advising a political leader, and I think the governor of Texas actually did, the governor of Hawaii, I did this pretty well when they had a problem with wine technology. They brought on board technology experts. A peer of mine was acquired, who's also broad in technology and capability and relatively independent from the companies, to advise on what was going on. And that's what has to happen. In most of the countries that are dealing well with technology, they open a technology office. The office is well staffed with competent people. that aren't closely aligned with the major businesses that they are influencing, because you can have kind of super lobbyists if you're not careful. So you need to maintain an independence, but you have to build up a competency and advisors that you trust as a politician that can tell you where you ought to put your money and put your efforts in order to better your constituency. But I think it's going to be hard to elect somebody that has that competency, because often people that are very competent in technology don't exactly have the most winning personalities, and they don't really deal well in politics. But as advisors, they can do very well. For instance, here we had an election, and Andrew Wang Yang, I think was probably the most competent person in terms of technology, and he didn't do well in the election, but he's doing pretty well as an advisor. And looking at past administrations here, when they've had decent advisors and capability, they've made pretty good decisions. When they haven't, in fact, using the Obama administration as an example, they had great advisors going through the election and did some amazing things with regard to analytics and voter turnout. And then they got rid of those advisors and replaced them with more political hacks during when he was elected, and the websites they put up and everything were all disasters as a result. So having competency in that core advisory group is absolutely critical, and starting with somebody that's probably a bit broad and not connected at the hip to a lot of companies would be the way to build that group. Then I've got to run because I'm 6 minutes late to my meeting.
Thank you, Professor Rob, Professor Jainuls, and Madam Durga Das. Thank you for your presentations. So you can leave right now. So we have other speakers as well. So we will send you our certification in your email. Thank you, Madam Durga Das. Thank you, Madam Jainul. Now I request Edward. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Actually, we have limitations. Only 10 speakers we give our slot. So thank you.
I shall then try to be only 10 minutes, but I certainly agree with much of what Rob has said and many others. Okay. And I'm going to do three things in my presentation. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about my group and what I'm doing. I'm the founder of the Human Achievement Alliance. You can look at our website if you would like to. And our idea is that exponential technology in communications and information, in biotech, in nanotech, in robotics, and artificial intelligence can transform the world, and is transforming the world, making us more prosperous with long, healthy, possibly even transhuman lives. That's the potential. Just two quick examples. The smartphone. There's an economic analysis done on the smartphone that shows that the technology and the capacities that went into the smartphone, if you wanted to get this capacity, say 30 or 40 years ago, it would have cost about $1 million. So literally anybody who has a smartphone is a millionaire in one sense. If you take a look, for example, at just a month or so ago, it was announced that the CRISPR-Cas9 genetic editing tool is being used now to turn on and off how genetic material expresses itself. And the reason why this is important is because they're working on turning off the tau protein, which is what causes Alzheimer's. Imagine the technology now that's literally being worked on where you can turn off genes that cause Alzheimer's and, of course, many other diseases. That's the kind of capacity and potential we're talking about with exponential technology. It's absolutely wonderful. If we can literally get to the point where we're ending aging. There's many interesting books that have been done in this subject. However, what we see is a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of pushback. There's a lot of concern that this very fast-moving technology is going to destroy jobs, and it's the same sort of Luddite concerns that we had 2 centuries ago with the Industrial Revolution. And of course, what we have with the Industrial Revolution eventually is the emergence of middle class and prosperity certainly in the Western countries and now, of course, around the world. However, we still see these fears out there. But again, the technology offers these incredible opportunities, and especially for emerging economies, where policymakers and entrepreneurs in emerging economies can skip a lot of the steps that were often painful that the West had to go through. Of course, in the Asia Pacific area, countries are at different levels of development, obviously. Countries like Singapore, countries like Taiwan, countries like South Korea are at very advanced levels. Others are more mixed, like Malaysia, where you have some very advanced parts of Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and poorer parts. And other countries are much further behind. So the things I'm going to say about leaders, if you're a leader in any of these countries, you have to, of course, look at what the local situation is and so forth. Now, what I want to do, the second thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the context for leadership. If you want to be a leader in one of these countries, here are some things you have to keep in mind. And the first thing to keep in mind is that the human mind is the ultimate resource. The human mind is what creates value. We are the creatures that can understand the world around us, and we can utilize the knowledge to create a better world. I want to call your attention. There's an incredible economist, late economist, Julian Simon, who wrote a book called The Resourceful Earth, followed up by a book called The Ultimate Resource. And the ultimate resource was, of course, the human mind. And there's been a lot of good work done of late on how to perfect your mind in terms of education, in terms of what I would call your moral sense and so forth. The second point that leaders should keep in mind is that the technologies we're talking about are tools. They're not some sort of magic. They're tools that can do certain things, just like centuries ago, a hammer, a machine, even going further back, the creation of fire and the plow and so forth. These were all tools that can be applied to creating a better world for individuals, to create more prosperity, better health, and all these kind of things. But that's what they are. They are tools. They're not magic. Understanding that they are tools, this comes to my third point, and that is it's the entrepreneur that figures out how to apply a tool to create value, to create a good or a service or an institution that works better for human flourishing and human prosperity. The entrepreneur is the individual, the creative individual, who looks at the resources that they have, the human resources, the tools that we've discussed, the technological tools in their environment, and then tries to put things together to create a better situation. I note that entrepreneurs quite often fail. That's going to be part of entrepreneurship. Henry Ford started two companies that didn't do very well before he started Ford Motor Company and came up with the entrepreneurial idea of an assembly line with interchangeable parts, with people working on just different parts of the process going down an assembly line. Thomas Edison supposedly tried 6,000 little filaments before he got one that worked in the light bulb. He didn't consider those failures. He considered those successes in discovering what doesn't work. Very interesting perspective. But again, it's the entrepreneur who's most important in creating value. My fourth point, education and training is absolutely crucial. If you are a leader, you have to understand that both for yourself and for your culture and environment, education is going to be crucial. And not just, and again, we've talked about this, and some of the speakers have talked about this before, not just the sort of 100-year-old or industrial revolution assembly line model where a kid goes down the assembly line at 9 o'clock, they have math poured into their heads, at 10 o'clock they have reading, 11 o'clock something else. That worked 2 centuries ago to create a literate class of people who contributed to their economy and were able to better themselves. But we know that individuals learn in different ways. We know that it's not just a matter of a sage on the stage assembly line approach. What I'd like to see, and if you are a leader, understand the importance of applying the concept of entrepreneurship to education, creating better education systems with the various tools that we have. This is going to be very important in the future, and part of that education is to teach kids to be flexible, to have good learning skills. Because if you learn a particular skill or at a particular time with exponential technology, chances are 5 or 10 years from now, it's going to change. The situation is going to change. That skill is not going to apply. So you need to be flexible enough. You have to have the learning capacity so that you can change, you can apply your skills elsewhere, and you can make yourself, as it were, robot proof, as we like to say. The fifth point is liberty is crucial. When I was at the Heritage Foundation, this was in the 1980s, I came up with the concept of an index of economic freedom to try to objectively measure economic freedom in countries and then look at correlations between economic freedom and prosperity. And not surprisingly, you can look at that index, or you can look at the economic the other one, the Economic Freedom of the World Index, which I worked on as well. And you see that the strongest correlation between prosperity is economic liberty, because it allows entrepreneurs to do their thing, so to speak, and to experiment, to try something. It fails, you try something else. And the other side of this is to understand that while I'm not an anarchist, and I believe that there's a role for governments, governments don't do a very good job. As we've heard, governments often simply represent vested interests. Government regulations often deter innovation. In the United States, we have a huge education complex that's devoted to doing things the old way, and that actively tries to stifle some of the innovative approaches. This is a problem. You have to recognize that there's a limit to what governments can do. Right now, in this country and in other countries, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. When you get sick, then you can go to a doctor, and then they argue whether the government should pay for it or a private insurance company or whatever. With technology today, for example, we could be developing a system with diagnostics that you wear that could detect your problems before they even manifest themselves, with genetic engineering, with sequencing your genome, and then having real-time monitoring with an artificial intelligence. We could head off a lot of the misery and diseases that we have. However, in this country, and I know in other countries because I've studied their healthcare systems, they're not really healthcare systems. They actually stifle these kinds of innovations. So that's very, very important to understand, that liberty is going to be essential for the entrepreneur. Final thing about the context of leadership is mindset. You have to have a mindset if you want to be a leader in either your business, industry, or your country and your government. You have to have a mindset that is optimistic, that is purpose-driven, that understands the importance of joy in achievement. And you might think, well, this is just some sort of generic, very vague thing, but you actually can look at this and understand that the cultures that have tended to do the best have been the cultures where you have optimism, where you have this notion of can do, we can go out, it doesn't matter, we can solve a problem. That's very important as well. Okay, I want to finally talk about some of the qualities of the leader.
Thank you.
Okay, well, can I go down very quickly my points about the leader qualities? I'll do very quickly here. First of all, you've got to be true to your vision. You have your vision, keep to it, don't get distracted. Number two, keep an eye on your audience and your customers, okay? That's very important as well. A lot of businesses fail because they don't keep an eye on their customers. Number three, you have to challenge your associates and your workers. It's got to be a mixture. If you take a look at the company Intel, it started out by Gordon Moore, who was very good in technology, Robert Noyce, who was kind of a visionary, and a guy named Andy Grove, who was a Hungarian refugee from Nazis and from communists. And he was kind of a hardcore, nope, you got to do your thing. That mixture of challenging workers, but was very important. But you have to, number four, be open to the ideas of your workers and your associates. Number five, you have to have your workers and associates empowered so that they feel that they are contributing to something, that their errors are not going to be held against them if it's just an honest error. You have to have that kind of empowerment. Number six, you have to be flexible. Apple was very flexible when Steve Jobs returned. Apple figured out that we can't compete with certain things, so we're just going to create our own new things. We're going to create an iPod, and then we're going to take an iPhone and create that thing, and then we're going to create an iPad. In other words, you have to be flexible and look to the future. Rob talked about the importance of strategy, not just looking at protecting what you've done before, but looking ahead. Number seven, leaders in countries have to keep an eye on the changing cultures of your country. You have to influence the culture. That's very important. Remember, inequality is not a bad thing if it comes from the fact that, for example, Steve Jobs becomes rich because he created the technology we're using right now. It has to be open to everyone, but you want to influence your culture. Number 8, I'm almost done, is you need to educate yourself. You always have to keep educating yourself. And number 9, finally, I want to suggest that you look at the idea of a Human Achievement Day, which is something my organization has done, and I'm very interested in working with all of you on a Human Achievement Day. That is to celebrate achievement. We are all achievers, whether we're nurturing a child to maturity or a business to profitability or writing a song or a poem or a business plan or a dissertation, whether we're designing a building, laying the bricks to the building, arranging for its finances. We're all achievers. So let's focus on the value of achievement and spreading that in our culture. And if you're a leader, I hope you'll do that. And again, thank you for your attention. And I'm sorry I went over a little bit, but I hope this is useful.
Okay, thank you. Anybody has any questions to Professor Edward? Okay. Thank you, Professor Edward, for your very good presentations. Hopefully, we can see your presentation next day, tomorrow. So thank you for joining today.
Okay, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, bye. Thank you. Professor David.
Thank you so much. I've loved what I've heard before. I'm going to use a couple of slides, but I'm going to talk a little bit about trends. Then I'm going to put on my professional futurist hat and say, here's our ways you should look at them and decide what to do in the future. Let me see if we can get this up. It's not that one. Hang on a second. Can you see the autonomous devices screen? Anyways, if you can see it, what I am showing is that autonomous devices really will be going well beyond what we've used before. And we're seeing it move very rapidly. The market penetration is going rapidly. I believe by 2028, we'll begin to see more of not only electric cars, but autonomous electric cars going forward. And we'll begin to see the various forms of automation taking a big lead. But you can kind of see it's not until 2045 or so that we truly have autonomous driving, where we can forget about the fact we're driving and what we're doing. But the amount of data it's going to take to do that is tremendous. If we look today at today's autonomous vehicle, it's 4,000 gigabytes of data per day, every day. So data is going to be extremely important. Communications, 5G is coming, and fiber to the home and others will be ubiquitous, but it doesn't always deliver a particular advantage. And you can begin to see that many countries are moving to where wireless only connections are becoming more common. In my current house, I have a wireless only connection. And 5 years ago, I would not do that. And we're seeing that movement. But only 1 in 7 mobile connections will be 5G by 2025. So as you begin to look at leaders of looking at the future, we hear the hype, but it's going to take a while for that to roll out. I love this slide, if you can see it right now, on smart appliances. You know, it says another beer, please, Hal. And the refrigerator says, Dave, I can't do that because you're getting too fat. I love the humor in this, but the fact is, everything this slide's implying we can do today. And the smart appliances, the use of AI, Internet and Things, and others are really, truly dynamically changing how we interact with what's around us. And the Internet of Things will be a huge opportunity. Over $6.2 trillion US as you begin to look at it. And it attaches most industries. You begin to see it, like we were talking about earlier, about 3D printing, advanced materials, renewable energy. All of this is going to impact where we're going as leaders. And IoT adoption will be over 100% in the next 10 years as Internet of Things, Internet of begins to look at every device. It will become as pervasive as chips. Today, I like to say, if you look at a device costs more than $100 and takes power, there's chips in it, and that's what's running it. And we'll see the same thing with Internet of Things adoption. And it's going to be a dramatic growth curve. In the last decade, it was over 39% compound annual growth. Smart cities are, like I like to talk to them, smart regions, smart communities. It is dramatically growing because of the growth of Internet of Things, because of ubiquitous connections, ubiquitous Internet. We're even working to deploy some smart communities in countries like Haiti, because it will help create new jobs, new opportunities, new industries, and dramatically change the welfare of that country. Edge computing, you're going to see that. We no longer can rely on centralized data centers because of the latency of them, because of the amount of sensor growth and things. You know, one of the things Rob said earlier, he talked about the ubiquity of people on the internet and working on the internet. Well, today as it is, 70% of the internet traffic does not involve people. It's devices talking to devices. And that was going to continue to increase. So as we think about the future with the internet, we have to think more about data than human to human communications, human to thing communications. Dramatic shifts if we go there, and how we architect that, how we begin to do things like fog computing and others will dramatically change how companies, how countries work and manage, particularly with the impact of COVID, where we're pulling back a lot of things and distributing them. This is just going to be enhanced and go forward much faster. The Internet Minute, these are great slides. In the sake of time, I won't go into this one, but the amount of what we do on different things and the amount of money spent online is just tremendously, you know, just a growth from last year to this year. You see tremendous growth in most of the categories. So we're entering the age of data, where data becomes the central business asset. And data generation has changed forever. Everything is instrumented now. You know, you get in the front seat of your car and it weighs you so it knows how much force to use with the airbag. And I'm going to use the oldest quote you're going to hear today from Herodotus from 500 BC. All things are flowing. And data is designed to be flowing, not used. If data is just being stored and not used, it has no value. Data's value comes from when you're using it. So remember, when data is moving, when it's being used, when it's used in analytics, it has value. And though, as humans, we begin to see our ability to adapt to all this technology has limits. And with this rate of change, the fact that we're in a time of lifelong learning is even more important. And it's everywhere. You know, this is a funny little one. Father, I have sinned. The priest looking at Facebook says, I already know. So you begin to see it ubiquitous and it's everywhere. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about education with a blended lifestyle where education and work and leisure all happen at the same time. This is really important as you look at what to do in the future. And we have a hierarchy of needs that change. Most realize Maslow's hierarchy of need with self-actualization, esteem, belonging, safety, and physiological. My hierarchy of needs starts with food and water, shelter, transportation, internet, mobile phone, and social networking. And what's funny is when I present this in universities, most of the time the students, the graduate students, 100% agree with my Smith hierarchy of needs, as opposed to the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And really, if I get back to the other side, what can bring civilizations to its needs? It's not the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns. Geeks today are what can bring civilization to its needs, and how we have to apply that. So I'm going to close real rapidly with just a framework that we use. It's called 6 Views of the Future. And it's used when you're trying to make decisions, when you're forecasting and looking together. And the key thing about the 6 Views of the Future is lets you, your organization, add more accuracy when you're looking at the future. The story I like to tell is, do you know why the windshield of your car is bigger than your rearview mirror? You want to know what's behind you, but what's really important to you going forward is what's in the future, what's in front of you. And these are tools to help you do a better job with that. So an extrapolator says the future is logical, you can predict it, you can use trend analysis to make those predictions. Engineers are traditional extrapolators. A pattern analyst is the next view. The future is replication of past events. You identify and analyze analogous situations from the past. Scientists are traditionally pattern analysts. An important thing to know, though, is each of these have different techniques underneath them and tools that you can use. The third one is a goal analyst. Future is determined by individuals, entities, and others. You identify the decision makers and the trendsetters and use impact analysis to use it. A counterpuncher. Companies like Cisco, Microsoft are great counterpunchers. What did they invent? Well, most of the time they acquire it very early stage from other companies and incorporate it. So a counterpuncher, the future is random. You identify many possibilities with a scanning surveillance program. You do develop scenarios so you can move fast, and you have to be flexible. And then there's an artist. Artist says there's no rules. It's out of the box thinking. It's diverse brainstorming, and innovation drivers are what you look at. And finally, there's an intuitor. And an intuitor, it says, let me talk to experts. Let me do things like what we're doing this, bring smart people together. Let me listen to it and synthesize my own answer, my own decisions. And that's really where we see this going as you look at the future. It's important to understand, though, the future is something that there's precursors to. There's a lead-lag relationship. So if you begin to do a good job of understanding what the early signals are and collecting those early signals, and then using tools like the framework of the 6 Views of the Future to take error out of the trends you're seeing on those tools, you will be successful in applying the futurist view to what you're trying to do. It's imperative, though, that you respect the past with your rearview mirror, but it's 100% necessary to look out that windshield of where you're going and to look around you. Otherwise, you're going to make errors and you will be wrong as much as you're right. So I've tried to go fast, and thank you so much. You're muted.
Anyone has any questions to Professor David?
Great job.
Yes, me again. Professor David.
Yes.
Yeah. One question, 2 questions that I've got for you. So one is, what would you say is the most important competence that a futurist leader needs to have that will serve in the future and currently, like will be able to serve him now? And given those 6 elements that you've mentioned, this is my second question. How do you balance all of that? How do you balance all of that to ensure that while you're looking in the rear mirror, you're also looking forward and also considering what's happening to you right now?
Great two questions. The first one I'm going to answer very rapidly, but it's one that is extremely powerful. I've worked with people to help design a concept called Technopolis. And in a Technopolis, for a leader, what you want to do is build active collaboration with not only the government people, but you want to build it with academia. You want to build it with large companies and small companies. And you want to pull this Technopolis concept together as you make decisions. In government, I see way too often, they only take one view or two views as they make their decisions. That is one of the things where the 6 views of the future framework comes together, and you combine that with a Technopolis concept. Again, academia, government, and industry. And that will help you make collaborative decisions where you factor out error by doing it that way, and you balance the interest. And to me, that's how you create great decisions as opposed to good decisions. The other one is a little bit more difficult as you look at it. We are all caught up in the demands of an instant decision because we live in a real-time connected global society. You know, when my parents were growing up, if something happened in India, you didn't know about it in Texas until the next day. Now we're seeing it real time. And as leaders, we're increasingly asked to react in real time. But yet most of our training has been use deliberate thought and then react. So one of the skills we need to teach ourselves is how to work in real time, but work smartly in real time. And part of that is developing a mindset where you can balance out the different views very rapidly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for joining today. So our next speaker, James Eid, for 5 minutes. So Professor, if you want, you can leave. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Professor Kimberly, for joining today. It's a great that after a long time, everybody see you. We are doing a summit on leadership, futuristic leaderships. So how you moving with your IBM televisions and other things. It's really great inspiration for global community. Thank you, Madam Kimberly, for joining with us. So Mr. James Eid, just 5 minutes. You just finish your presentations. Then I want to give a chance to Professor Kimberly. Yes.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sharif. You know, I have my show on Friday morning, so I can only take 5 minutes, but I'm doing this out of respect for Sharif and what he's doing. But this is a tremendous opportunity to participate on a panel of familiar faces and to an audience that I just hope is the type of people that are willing to become futuristic leaders, because that's what's going to be necessary for us to solve the global problems that we're facing now. A little bit of, you know, you're going to hear different ideas about leadership, what leadership, I have what leadership means to me. And that's what I'm going to share with you right now. And my background was in systems programming. I was a senior systems programmer, and the company that I worked for was facing massive problems, and there was a lack of leadership. So they put me into leadership positions. Now, systems programmers are the geeks that the previous speaker warned us about. And, you know, these people are only kind of pay attention to what they think is right. And it's hard to organize them. It's hard to lead them. But, you know, I ended up being a director level manager of these people because I led by example. I walked the talk. These are qualities of leadership that you have to do to inspire others to follow in your vision. So the ability to inspire others is very important. You know, but then I retired and I started up, you know, still private investor, but started into the world of chess, which was my background, my hobby, my love. And, you know, I became president of the Youth Foundation. I became president of the California State Federation. I was elected to the Chess Journalists of America, national-wide election, then again a nationwide election to the National Governing Organization, appointed to the World Governing Organization to represent the United States. And all of these things, if there's people that are harder to manage than systems programmers, it would be chess players. They're all, it's like herding cats. It's very difficult, but you do it by walking the talk and inspiring others. And when you have your own vision of what needs to be happening in the future, you have to be able to articulate it. You have to be able to see what is not there, to have a vision. A vision is in your imagination first, and then you have to manifest it into reality. And how do you do that? By articulating and being inspirational, and by inspiring others, because no one can do it alone. You need other people. So and you need other talents. There were certain things that I was very good at and certain things that I was lousy at. So I needed the people who were good at the things I was bad at to do those things for me or with me. So this is what leadership means to me, to inspire others to work as a team. And as a team, you can accomplish far more than any single individual can. But you need that person to be a leader. And that leader, don't define it by personal magnetism. This animal magnetism, we call it. People could be attracted. That's about self. You could have the Don Juans, where people are attracted to Don Juan. But that's about Don Juan himself. You must be attracting people to something outside yourself, something beyond yourself, something that is inspirational to people of all ways of life. Because it's about the globe. It's not about you. It's not about yourself. You have to be inspiring people that is something outside of yourself. So don't give in to the snake oil salesman. Don't buy into the people that are selling something that will benefit them at your expense. This is not leadership. This is animal magnetism, and we must differentiate between the two, be clear on what the difference is. So that you would follow in the footsteps of leaders. And it could be Don Quixote tilting at windmills. And I say you have to envision something that is not there yet and inspire others to accomplish it. But you can also follow people who are tilting at windmills, at monsters that do not exist. So you must be able to differentiate between a vision that is achievable and is solving a real world problem, and not some fantasy that you just imagined, I want to fix this. And it's useless to others. And it is only useless to themselves. So don't follow an imaginary leader. Don't follow someone who's going down a road that'll take no one anywhere. And don't follow the snake oil salesman. Follow the true leader who is inspiring you to do something that is not going to benefit them personally, but something beyond themselves. And this is, to me, is the definition of leadership. Manifesting something from your imagination into reality and inspiring others to help you achieve it. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share, Sharif, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. We have our great leaders, Senator Sheikh Rahman from USA, from Georgia. He joined with us. Thank you, sir, for joining this summit. It's a futuristic leadership summit. So many of the speakers from Asia Pacific, from Africa, from South Asia, even from North America, many of the speakers join. So we are really happy you joined with us. So I want to give you a chance for your presentation after Professor Kimberly. So I want to give a chance to Professor Kimberly. She is a president of IBM Televisions. So thank you.
Wow, what an honor to be on the panel with such great minds in the world. And Jim, it's great seeing you. And as always, you're so eloquently spoken. Let's just real quick talk about the importance of leadership, and we can take a look at what has happened historically in the past and what's recently happened, and why good leadership is so important. And the main key is to provide us quality of life. Okay, we need good leaders who are going to help establish each and every one of our communities with quality of life. And that's going to be very, very important. And as we all know, this didn't happen in the last year and a half. And we need to focus on that. the most important thing that a good leader should have is not just good skills to lead, but empathy. They need to feel and understand the pain that the people are having. And I was always told what makes a good leader is someone who was always a good follower. Okay. And one of my favorite books as a child was The King with No Clothes, or The King Who Has No Clothes. And I don't know if any of you ever read this fairy tale or heard about it, but it was about a king who had people who made his clothes for him. And they can, like Jim was talking about the snake oil and things like that. He had people who came to him and convinced him that they would make him clothes that were so wonderful and beautiful, and he would pay them that the whole world would bow down to him. But what they did was they made invisible clothing for him. You know, they didn't really make anything. They just pretended. And everyone around him would comment on how great the clothing and beautiful it was, because they feared the king for what he would do, because he was more of a commander. He would punish them if they said things he didn't like. But one boy told him, hey, there's nothing there, right? And so it's that honesty and transparency that is, I think, that's very important between the people and our leaders. And our leaders need to quit pretending like they're kings. No offense to the senator here. But they need to start realizing that we're all human, they are human, and we need to be transparent. We need to be open with each other, and we need to communicate with each other with as much honesty as each other can handle. But also remember, you know, what are the facts backing up what you're sharing, right? Make sure you have the facts that you're backing up with what you're doing, because we only know what we know. I mean, I hate that saying, but the senator, yep, you're right. But I appreciate this opportunity. This is truly my first appearance in several months since the tragedy. And I'm slowly trying to get my wings again. So I thank you, Sharif, for including me in this wonderful, beautiful conversation that presents all the positive things that we need to be focused on in our future. Thank you. Where did Jim go? I would like to say hi to him. I guess he jumped out. I think Sharif is frozen. Okay, so I'm a TV host, so we got to keep this going. Senator,
I'll go ahead, I guess, if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Why don't you share with us?
Well, you know, I appreciate, I'm glad to join with you all. You know, Sharif invited me several times. I didn't have time, even today. The time difference in United States over here, I didn't realize, you know, I don't keep up with the times, you know, beside in our world anyway. So I wasn't ready, but I'm glad to join with you all. But the topics of what I've been hearing, you know, you and Jim, it was great. And absolutely, I'm with you all. What he said to me, as a matter of fact, in terms of leader, I'm not sure I'm an activist. It just happens to be, I consider myself an activist. And I've just happened to be elected, and that's what I personally believe myself. And a leader comes to me in all different sizes and shapes, and from all over. You know, just because you have a title, not necessarily you're going to be the leader. That's where I look at it. You know, your leader could be at your work. You could be a leader in your church or your organization, that your association or your community or your club that you play with, or whatever it is. You know, to me, it's all different size and shape, and you are willing to represent your folks the best possible way you can. That's the way I look at myself. When I ran, you know, I'm in politics and in activism for number of decades now. And there was a point came in, I say, I just can't stay on the sideline. I need to represent my folks. I need to stand up and I need to run for election. That's how I got into running for public office. That's how I got elected. So not necessarily, I didn't have in mind, oh, I'm going to be leader. That's why I have to run. If you think that you are a leader yourself, then you are not really. You know, people have to tell you, people have to follow you. You know, you can just tell people, come and follow me. I'm going to do that. That don't happen, you know. I mean, that could happen, but you're not going to go nowhere. that people have to love you. You have to work with people. It doesn't matter which country, where you live. I represent one of the most diverse state senate district, not only in Georgia, in the country. I have people from more than 100 different countries. I have people who speak more than 100 different languages.
Wow.
1/3 of the people in my district weren't born in this country, not in the United States. 1/3 of the people weren't born in the state of Georgia, born somewhere else. 1/3 is born other 49 different states and territories. Only 1/3 of Georgian, they were actually Georgian born in the state of Georgia. That's the district I represent. I'm in Georgia. It's a red state. It's a Republican state. If you look at it, I'm the first immigrant, first Asian American elected. So I had to get people from, even in my campaign stuff, from Chinese to Mexican to Korean to Indian to, from all. I could not have done it. When I took oath, I brought Muslim imam, Christian, reverend, Jewish rabbi, a Hindu priest, Buddhist priest. I brought everybody together to make sure when I took oath that I say, I'm not a Muslim senator, I'm not a immigrant senator, and I'm not an Asian senator. I'm a Georgian senator. I'm here to work for all of you. So you have to bring people together. Doesn't matter which country where you live, the people you represent and people that you live around, you have to bring out together. To me, that should be your goal, for the common good. You got to do something for the common good.
I have a question for you. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem.
I do. Sharif knows. So I have a question, though. I always believe that the leader actually works for the people, right? The leader. What do you and what you speak of is very profound. It's about uniting. United we stand. That's what the United States is for. But we're really not united. Don't take this offensively.
No, you're actually right.
But our laws are different in every state. How can we change things like this to unite us? Because I get tired of going from one state to the other. Everything is different legally. Everything does not unite us. I think they keep us divided so that we can't achieve certain quality of life goals. So maybe you can help unite us. I'll be more than glad to talk to you outside of this. But maybe what would you suggest?
See, there's going to be always going to be some divide, but we still have to find a common ground. Something is common ground. I'm going to just give you an example. If you go right now in the Georgia website, if you look at Senate resolution, I think it's 203, whatever they say, it's an outdoor learning study committee. In Georgia, we have to have 29 vote in order to pass anything in Senate. The bill I sponsored had a 31 sponsor. We're going to pass. We created the committee. I brought the majority of the leadership of the opposite side because this is something, is a well-being for the young and children of Georgia. So you always have to find something where in order to have some common goods for every citizen of Georgia. Whatever I do that affect 11 million Georgians, not that couple of 100,000 people that I represent. So if you keep that in mind, I think that if last decade in Georgia, nobody had that many sponsors, from both sides, they come in, they sponsor a bill to get it done. So you have to find something. I'm not sure that, I would be able to do something in next year, but the thing is, always you have to strive to do it. Always you have to have a good faith, an honest faith. If I go and fight in the floor, like whatever I have to say, whatever I believe, I strongly say. But then again, when I'm out there, we are all friends. We work together for the betterment of the city of Georgia. And I try to maintain this relationship. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat or left or right or extreme, whatever it is, to me, because somebody elected them, somebody voted them. So I cannot just look at it, the people voted for me, I'm going to fight. Yeah, definitely I'm going to fight. How about my colleagues? They're fighting for their constituencies too. So we have to make sure we have to at least try to work something towards common goal, That's where I look at it. I don't have any magics. I don't know, but so far it's been good. It's no guarantee, but still have to try, still I believe I have to strive to, do the best I can.
Thank you, Mr. Sheikh Rahman. Actually, you are a great inspiration for Bangladeshi community because your origin from Bangladesh. I'm also from Bangladeshi, no problem. So actually, I'm here for Malaysia right now. I live Malaysia, and we do our collaborations around the world, 100 different countries. We are developing our think tanks and other things, but most important thing is that our major focus is youth communities. So you are a very good inspiration for a country like Bangladesh, like for developing nations. What we are producing, like knowledge-based community, we are sharing with the developing nation, country like Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, this kind of countries. Even Africa, we have our collaborations. So how you want to inspire the youth community, how they should set their goal in this challenging situation, because you have to understand in developing nations right now for this COVID, what I know, 70% student drop out for education system. Country like Bangladesh, for last 14 months they cannot open their school, college and university. In South Asia, in education industry, $1 trillion loss in education industry. It's a massacre. Even in Malaysia, I know 50% student drop out. So what type of positive like information you want to share for our audience?
Well, what I would say, COVID is unfortunate what happened. Let's pray. And I think we're moving forward. What happened, we can look at the past. What happened. We have to encourage people to get vaccinated and move forward. It will take, I honestly believe it will going to be another year, to probably be next summer before things get into normal, whatever we think about normal. And of the young folks, what I would say, I can understand, our children, youth are frustrated because they're staying too much, they stay too long in a computer, and it's not easy. It's a mental health issue too right now, because we need to, that's what the bill I was talking about was trying to get, how we can have our youth and children go outside, had a outdoor learning situation, get that out of the computer, because I see young children nowadays, 90% of the time inside home, they're using iPad or phone, electronics, whatever it is. They're not going outside. I mean, this is going to be the issue of their well-being, their health issue. So those are the things that we have to think for the future. But let me tell you something else. I'm glad why you talk about the youth around the country, around the world. I think the youth generation, even in Bangladesh or any remote countries in Africa, because of the internet system, because all this opportunity access we have. When I was youth, I didn't have it. When I came from Bangladesh, 40 some years ago, that time I looked at the computer, I never even touched it. I came to the United States in a community college, the first time I touched computer. So my 10 years, so I have a 10 years old, he knows more about computer than I'll ever learn. So the young generation has much more opportunity, much more access around the world for the resources. So future is bright. Future is bright. Doesn't matter if you're in the United States or you're in Bangladesh or in Nigeria or Uganda, wherever in this world you have, there can be a better opportunity than people like me. I don't think that as much struggle I had to do. I mean, let's face it, the world has changed. And to some extent, it's changed for the better. You cannot just blame and look at it something that, I didn't have, we don't have, you cannot have. When I came to this country, I didn't have a job. I was unemployed. I was dishes in a restaurant. My dishwasher was my first job. And I have no problem saying that. Took me 14 years to finish my undergraduate degree because I dropped out of school 8 years I couldn't afford. So there's a lot more opportunity now, but you have to have a mindset. And when I came to this country, I said, I'm going to get a U.S. education. I'm going to go to the college. And I couldn't afford it. But then again, when I was the time that I could afford to go back to school, I went back to school. Took me 14 years to finish my undergraduate. Got a degree in economics and global studies, international relationship. Went back to graduate school. So you have to you have to have willingness to sacrifice too, and you can't give up. You just cannot give up. You're gonna be tough. It's not gonna be easy. Nobody gonna give it to you. That's the one I'm going to tell you to young generation. Doesn't matter you are in Bangladesh or United States, anywhere in the world, wherever you are, you cannot give up, and you have to work hard, and things will fall in chips. It's no guarantee, but you'll have an opportunity. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Getting out of time.
Thank you, sir. Sir,
I'm sorry. I'll one day.
Yes,
I'll join
no problem. Thank you. We just sharing one information. The other part of the world, like developing nations, even though they do not have enough internet connections, enough devices, like computers and other things, and they already come to the outside and they go for protest and other things, that we need to open our education system, because many of our students already drop out. Many of our women has to go for marriage because the developing cultures. So this is happening. We have core sympathy about the youth community, because youth are the future. 40% of the population live in Asia Pacific, and from there 50 to 57% actually youth. So we have core sympathy. So those who are contributing for our like this kind of educational content, everything we distribute our youth community for their development, for their educational purpose, for their career guidelines, even sustainable development goal, different kind of like technology related session we are developing. Many of our speakers support us long times. So because we want to support this youth community, we want to support the global community, those who need our support. So thank you, Sheikh Rahman, for joining with us, and it's really great session for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
all.
you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Yes. I want to request Dr. Babar Afzal. Can you unmute, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My context, it was very interesting that we're talking about leadership today, and that is what I was speaking to Mr. Sharif as well. A little background. I come from a very, different background. I'm a shepherd. I herd goats, and I have my past career into business consulting, and I was one of the ethical hackers from India. Technically speaking, in the context of leadership, I heard some of the panelists speaking about, the role of AI and, the way it will change transportation, manufacturing, healthcare, education, media, and even customer service. But, I would, just to sum up some of my thoughts, I would just like to slightly point to this practice. The leadership is now somewhat a practice which refers to a range of behavior and thoughts and the process around it, which is typically the actions that leaders take on central issues about which they have evolving thoughts and feelings. To softly point out what is the zones in which today's leaderships should be structured. We have business, we have people, we have society, we have reflection, internal reflection, diversity, and ingenuity. Pointing out what should be the ideal role model in terms of when we talk about the future leaders. There's so much we have seen in the past 1 year. I typically divide this whole thing into 3 parts. Initially when we saw internet coming in, which was typically, I would say, Web 1.0. That was a paradigm shift when we saw internet, and that created a lot of leadership around the world. And it created opportunities, and which was again the opportunities which were addressed by a lot of problem solvers. Then we got into presently we are in Web 2.0, where we have the emergence of social media, and where people are connecting, and we have this technology change has created a level playing field for everyone. Now this is where we are. When we talk about future, it is typically Web 3.0, where we see that there is a democratization that will happen within this within these connections, which is where we say formal structures will be broken, where governments will become irrelevant, where we already see banks have become irrelevant. There's so many things that will evolve out of this, and that is where the new leadership roles will also come into play. And when I talk about leadership in the future, typically those would be the people who take responsibility of their own mistakes, who seek the knowledge required to make sense of the big picture. They examine what role they play in the challenges that they individually or as organizations face. They also see and treat failures as a chance to learn and grow. Uh, there would also be people who reflect often on their performance as a leader. So when I and they're very frank, they speak frankly with others to learn from them and build their trust. So when I talk about leadership in the future, I would try to sum it up into something very simple. Leadership in the future, even today now, it is a mutual discovery process. Um, this is where I would say, the future is pointing that, when you typically talk about the 60s, leadership was in a structure where we had, the format was ready, aim, and fire. That was a typical structure that the leaders followed. But then as we evolved into 80s and 90s, this thing changed slightly in a different manner, where it was ready, fire, and then aim. Why? Because the environment around was so drastically changing, and it was, we had to fire, because if we missed that opportunity, we had to fire first and then aim, and that was typical leadership style. But now when we talk about the future, and when we talk about AI replacing humans, I think this is where we are evolving, where we now see that the target will also be firing back on you. So it would be fire, fire, fire. So this is where the leadership is evolving, and that is what I personally believe, because you have to be ready. So going from a mechanism where we had ready, aim, fire, to then going on to ready, fire, and aim. Why? Because the target was constantly changing. And now going into the future, where even the target is firing back on you, where we talk about, the Stephen Hawking's quote that this is the last thing that humanity will see, which is AI. And AI would actually be firing back on us. And that is where, new leadership, the structure will evolve. And that is what my experience as herding goats comes into play. A very interesting analogy I will share, and which is one of the behavior which I see is typical of a leader. Leaders in the future will know when to exit. I think that would be the best skill that would be needed. We talk about learning, unlearning, and relearning, but here I'm saying leadership structures of the future would have people who have the capacity, or will have the capacity, to understand when to exit the party. When I look at it from a shepherd perspective, I would say, the shepherd knows when to exit the pasture. And when I say when to exit the pasture, there is there's a lot of philosophy around it, where I typically mean that the shepherd understands that the absence is required for the pasture to regrow, and that is very, very important. And when you talk about the startup world and where the technologies are moving into the future, I would say, this is even today, we see this is one of the key skills. Why? Because when you talk about investments coming from a venture capitalist, when you talk about startup structures, this is one key skill that the venture capitalists who are investing in technologies and the future, they want to know when can they take an exit. And trust me, this one skill is the leadership skill of the future. So the party cannot go on forever, and we as leaders, if we are shaping ourselves into becoming future leaders, or what would be the roles that would define futures, is something like this. Apart from this, when I look at evolving leadership around the world, I believe that leaders, be it organizations, even world leaders, will create their own dance. And what I mean is that this is where the leadership role would be a leadership role of inspiration, and that is where collaborations come in. That is where the future holds for everyone, and leaders will be the people who will be identified for their passion. And I think that is what I would say, a lot of things, but aligned with passion. So when we look at the future, obviously we are talking about a big shift in terms of technologies. But trust me, as we are moving into the future with the speed of thought and the way the technology is evolving, the key thing for a leader would be that humane character, and that is what would define and would be a layer which would segregate a leader from something which would be pure mechanical or robotic. So those are my closing thoughts in terms of how I see the leadership evolving, when on one side we have so much going on in terms of technology evolution, and that is where technology will make a lot of things transparent. It will democratize, it will change the playing field, and that is where we will see that there is so much of useless stuff that we have been doing. And this is where we see, when technology evolves. Today we already hear about cryptocurrency. It is a classic case where this digital currency is already making banks irrelevant. It is making transactions, the structure is changing. Any kind of a control created by the reserve banks of a country, or through any formal structure or a policy, becomes irrelevant in one go. Similarly, we see now emergence of NFT, which is non-fungible tokens, which is something that sits on blockchain technology, where everything that you create can be traced back into, we say, this is where we can trace the origin of anything. Those are the things which will change the future landscape, and that is where, when we talk about Web 3.0, the changing landscape is which is creating opportunities for new leaders to evolve. And this is what we have seen. The way we have evolved from Stone Age to where we are now, and from here when we go into the future, I think there are so many things which will remain same, but we will be playing in the hands of technology. Yes, but at the same time, what will distinguish us from a advanced AI is our emotion. I always talk about this. The power of emotion is something that will continue to change the way we evolve, and that would be the one single trait of a future leader. That is how I close. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. From speakers, if you have any questions to Dr. Babur Afzal. Anybody has any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Babur Afzal. I know you have a very interesting products you are launching from Kashmir, and this is very, very interesting. So hopefully in the future, you can create a lot more employment for the youth community of Kashmir. So
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Babur
Welcome.
Afzal.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Aaron, I think your presentation for 5 minutes. Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, sorry. So there have been so many brilliant points made by the other panelists, like there always are. And this is kind of more expanding upon it and aimed directly towards the youth community. First off, I would like to say thank you to Sharif, who is himself a futuristic leader, and to the World Talent Economy Forum for helping to inspire and create future leaders. I can't stress enough how important projects like this are to creating future leaders. Since I only have just a few minutes to grapple with such a broad and deep topic, I've opted to skip the formal statistics and historical quotes and go straight to the philosophical end of it. So, I mean, what is leadership? What does leader even mean, let alone futuristic leadership? We as a species and as individuals tend to think that being a leader means being able to command others or having a position of power over others, but this simply couldn't be further from the truth. Now, helping to bring people together and assist in organizing efforts that create harmony, this is what it is to be a leader. Like a conductor of a symphony, he is not superior to the members of his orchestra. They each know that they all have important parts to play in the creation of something much greater than themselves. They all come together for one higher purpose, and the leader is the cement that holds everything together. Leaders are created as a result of new problems emerging, as new problems always will. They are born into adversity out of necessity to fulfill a purpose. The leaders of the future face now, perhaps, more daunting problems than any future leaders of our past ever have. And so, a new era of visionary must be born. This future leader must understand balance. They will be transparent, diverse, and adaptive and flowing like water. Yet they will be able to take practical steps as firmly as hardened cement. Imagine a critical thinker and a unifier who puts the needs of the whole before the needs of the self. They will seek to empower people and not to take power. These will be the people who are naturally able to look into an uncertain future without fear, but with hope, foresight, and ingenuity. But they will also never just jump into things blindly. They will seek constantly to understand their ripple effect, always trying to look at second, third, and even fourth wave effects of their actions. They will take great initiative and set upon their labor with gravity and excitement because they genuinely see the world as an ever-evolving place worth fixing, and people as brilliant creators. And so this labor ceases to be a burden, but a labor of love. And this leader's labor to the whole creates growth, connectivity, sustainability, opportunity, and abundance. Now, there is no place in this future for the great dictator, as I've come to call them, because bad leader is an empty phrase. It's an oxymoron. Those who always seek to take power make for a horrible leader, but a great dictator. They are the antithesis of the emerging leaders of their time. They feed on exploitation, greed, and selfishness, and their tools are fear, division, confusion, and strife. They are stubborn and closed-minded and only hold people back. They do not understand flow or harmony. They are like a machine. They are cold. They lack empathy, and they are in many ways inhuman and the creators of every dystopian future that we have ever imagined. So how does one embody the spirit of the futuristic leader? What does it mean to be a futuristic leader? How do you become a futuristic leader? It starts with, first off, observing problems, real practical problems around you, and taking an initiative on them. Getting fed up, with all these things going on and nobody doing anything about them, and stepping forth to take some initiative on the matter yourself, and then others will naturally begin to follow you. This involves humbleness. This involves transparency. This involves realizing that you are a conductor of a symphony. You are not an overlord. It is the dictator that felled mighty Rome. And I think that future leaders are going to continuously try to move more and more away from this machine-like view of this world. Because currently, world leaders and leaders in general, people who think they're leaders anyway, the great dictators, that is, only see the world in black, white, and green. They do not see the human element. They do not understand compassion. They do not seek to understand human suffering. But the future leader will, and he will seek to put an end to suffering in whatever way that he can, through collaborative efforts of a team operating as a whole, to seek out and to achieve the highest goals and dreams and desires of humanity and to make everybody's lives easier. These future leaders will have to be adaptive, more so than ever before. They're going to have to be centered from their heart, and everything is going to have to come from their heart and from noble intentions if we are ever going to make progress. And I believe that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, for your very good presentations. Madam Ali from UK.
Hi, I love that. It's hard to even add to that because I agreed with everything. And I've worked with young people for the past 30 years in education, and I've worked using a creative process that enables students to lead their learning. So essentially what it does is it gives them autonomy. And to me, autonomy is about making our own decisions. It's not sitting in cars that drive for us. Autonomy is about making decisions, having free will, realizing you make a difference in the world. And I think that kind of adds to what you already ably said. So I think, it's already, my son's just finished school today and is only 16, and he's already got great leadership skills, and so have most of his friends. And the thing is that they're not afraid. They're well informed, this generation. They've got information at their fingertips, and they know that there's lots of problems that they need to solve. And for me, I think this generation, instead of being the lost generation, are the young people that are going to be able to transform and see where the solutions are, as long as the gatekeepers that are in the big organizations don't stop them. And I think, we have to kind of question we can't be profit led anymore. So I think it's just, the ecology of the world and what we're doing to the world, and the mental health of the well-being of the world as a whole needs to be questioned. One of the things that I watched the other day that was really shocking to me is Nestle had a supermarket on a boat that went down the Amazon, and it was kind of a propaganda thing, but it said that all the food that was on board that ship was healthy and nutritious and added to well-being. And what happened is it's given them lots of sugar, lots of processed food, and it's caused obesity in those. And one of the things that I've said from the beginning, since I've been part of the forum, is I don't understand why Asia Pacific doesn't realize that the West has made massive, massive problems. And you don't need to follow what we do. You need to look at your own culture and see where the problems are and fix them. And don't be pushed into the snake oil. Don't do things because the West is doing things. The AI thing that I watched the other day, there's a massive competition between China and America with artificial intelligence, and they just want to win. So from what I saw on this program, and I don't want an Orwellian existence for my future or my children. And I stood in 1984 when I was the same age as my son, and we're beginning to get close to that. So we want to be free, don't we? We had 2 world wars to get our freedoms. And essentially, we're all part of a big world that relies on clean water, clean air, good food that's nutritious, not processed food. And it's simple. And the thing is that ultimately we want to be happy, don't we? So that's about looking at our communities first. And then the good thing about technology is we've got a global reach. So I'm really invested in my own community and education, but I can reach out to people that have education and kind of innovation at the heart of what they do around the world. And but the speech that you just gave was amazing. So yeah, that's my kind of input to it. Is that okay?
Yes. Anyone has any questions to Madam Ali? Okay. Professor Donald from California. Can you unmute, please?
People have been making a lot of the points that I want to make, but I want to say things in a different way. And I have a couple of slides that I hope will help substantiate what I'm saying. I think that the most important thing to understand is, in fact, I'm going to ask a question directed to one of the people. It's a rhetorical question because he isn't here. But the question is, when he talks about minds, what does he mean by what is a mind? I mean, we don't really know. I mean, there's 15 different versions of psychology. In a way, a mind is an explanation. That person just did something. Like, why did they do it? Oh, well, and we come up with all these reasons. And where do the reasons come from? They come from our background. We grow up learning social structure that all of us are involved in. And you can't have, as other people said, you can't have leaders without followers. There's actually started to be scientific research on followership now instead of leadership. And I think any leader would do well by trying to understand what it is that has people become basically involved in the reality that the leader's creating. And the reason I say that is because leaders are creating meaning for people. It's not just about money. We measure things in money, which is a mistake. Like right now, we consider a good CEO to be the one that makes the company the most profitable. And you can make the company profitable by firing a lot of people because your expenses become lower than your revenue. And that's not a good leadership. And I hope that in the future we start taking into account the things that leaders do for people besides just paying their salaries. And the most important point is something that I want to ask another rhetorical question, which is, think of 3 things that you get that are important in life that you don't get from other people. I've asked this of hundreds or thousands of people, and people come up with some lame thing like a walk on the beach or something like that. But even that's important because of the context. Oh, you know, you're away from people for a little while, so you get a chance to think. But all of those things, you've learned things. There really isn't anything. And so the connections you get and where you get your information are basically the people that you've met and the connections that you've made. I want to show you a slide. I want to do this as quickly as possible because, of course, I don't want to take everybody's time. But let's see if I can figure out how to work this. I've never done it before. That's the danger of doing things like this in technology. If you haven't had
share option, there is a share option.
I did share option. It's popping up with screen share. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hold on. Firefox is trying to prevent me. Oh well. Okay, I'm just gonna say visually, say what I was gonna show you visually, which is that. Oh, I can't. Can you still see me?
No, Professor.
I don't know how to shut off the sharing option. Firefox decided to block me. Can you see me now?
No.
Damn. Sorry. Sorry for my French.
Okay.
Okay. Man, can you see me
No
now?
problem. No, no problem. You can continue. We can.
I'll just continue without my expressions. Basically, if you think the world is divided into groups of people that are not connected to each other, and groups of people that are connected to each other. So basically, I've never met any of actually I have because we're all friends with Sharish, but not counting Sharish, I don't know the people that you're close to. I don't know your families. I don't know the people that you went to college with. But there's links between those people. And Sharish is a link. Sharish has linked us all together. He's a bridge between all of us as groups. And every single solitary person in the world knows things you don't know. Everybody. You can get good advice from homeless people. I've had it happen several times for me where they've saved me when I was lost or something like that. There's no person in the world who isn't a door into a whole world of people that you don't know, that know things that you don't know. It's a two-edged sword because if you stay in your group, you wind up continuing to know the things that your group knows. You don't, and it's been shown that creativity isn't something that just appears in somebody's head. Creativity is when you recognize something that somebody's doing in another what I'll call social world, and you find that that'll apply into your own social world. And research has shown that the people who connect into the most other social worlds, and I was just delighted to hear the senator talk about this, the people who connect into the most social worlds wind up being leaders. I mean, there's actual research where we go out and we look at the connections that people have and we figure out, that was the chart, the pictures I was going to show you, and we can see that who are the people who have the most diverse connections? And diverse means connections into places where you wouldn't, that are different than you. The people that they make the most money, they have, believe it or not, fewer colds. And according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. And a lot of people on this panel have mentioned the whole idea of empathy. And the question gets to be, let me just say that you might consider that to be social capital. And when you're building a business, you need financial capital, human capital, and social capital, because you don't know what you don't know. And the connections that you have into areas, different areas. So if you're an entrepreneur and you don't know anything about finance, but you're lucky enough to know, or not necessarily lucky, you've made the deliberate investment in knowing people that know about finance. If you want to expand your company into the United States, make the deliberate effort to meet people in the United States. Whatever that happens, you can make a phone call or send a text or to somebody who can answer questions for you. And that's a heck of a lot easier than researching it. So overall, you need to invest in having this social capital. And as a leader, I agree with what James has said. In fact, James picks this up because I got this from Jim March, who is a professor at Stanford Business School, or was. And Jim said, Jim uses 3 books for his course at Stanford Business School. He uses Don Quixote, War and Peace, and Crime and Punishment. And he says, everything that you need to know about strategy you can get from War and Peace. Everything you need to know about ethics you can get from Crime and Punishment. And everything you need to know about leadership you can get from Don Quixote. And when you stay in that little bundle that you're in, that group of people that you're familiar with, and follow the rules and structure, you can't be Don Quixote. I mean, you have to get outside of that. And how do you get outside? What's the way to do it? Everything you know, you got from somebody else. Whether you got it from a book, whether you got it from a movie, or whether you got it from just talking to people. Everything. And that's why I go back to the question of what is a mind, because really who we are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And we get these stories from the people around us. And that's what makes us who we are. So when somebody starts having empathy and starts being able to see into these other worlds and get into these other kinds of worlds, many people are going to go, wow, that's so cool. I've been doing the same thing. And some people will be scared. I mean, some people just don't want to do things differently. You can't really lead them at all, because in the end, they don't want to be bothered with doing something new and different or beneficial to everyone else. So what I'm saying here is that there's a lot of research in sociology and anthropology on creativity, leadership, health, and the bottom line for all of that is that we are our relationships. That's what makes us who we are. And if we want to become better, if we want to become a leader, if we want to become healthier, wealthier, and wiser, we need to learn to develop relationships. I said that was my summary, but I want to say one other thing about it, which is the way that you do that is you have to just tell yourself that what I think is right, what I think is true, and what I think is fair may not be the same for everybody. And so you have to listen. And when they say put yourself in somebody else's shoes, don't imagine what you would do if you were in that situation. Try and understand why the things that happen to them and influence them to have them be the way they are. I'm just reading Native Son right now, which is an incredibly important book about an African American moving from the South to the North. And it just changes you to be able to try and put yourself in the shoes of someone else and get their life and their position. So read Don Quixote, read Native Son. It might not mean a lot for somebody that isn't an American, but still, there's wonderful, expand yourself and try and become the world of the other person. Become part of that world. Do it, and you'll see. It opens everything, and you will become a leader.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Thank you for joining today's sessions. I want to give special thanks to our speakers, those who actually like joined today and actually last 1 year from 100 different countries, 300 different organizations. They joined with World Talent Economy Forum, and this is really great success for us. And we need more of your support, because we are trying to developing a valuable content for the youth community, for policymakers, for the corporation, and especially it's for developing nations, especially it's for Asia Pacific. So how we getting support from the global community? This is really grateful for us. Thank you, Senator Sheikh Rahman, for joining today. Thank you, Professor Donald, Madam Ali Rice. And I want to give special thanks to my teammate, because behind the scene, we have some team member day and night. They are working with me. Mohammad Shohel Rana, he also supporting World Talent Economy Forum. Hosna Rafirdos, Humaira Tanzila, everybody actually working very hard with me to developing this kind of content. So because like behind the scene, we have a lot of work, lot of distributions and many things. So thank you for your excellent support, and all of your certificate we will provide you soon by next week, and we will communicate with you, because those who join, this is really great content for us. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. First, Senator Sheikh Rahman, then Professor Donald, and finally Ali Rice. What's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, it's a great forum. I wish I would have joined a little earlier, but whatever I heard so far is excellent, and I hope young generation who are listening going to learn from it, and I'm glad to be part of it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Can you unmute, please?
I just want to emphasize that you can't, in order to be a leader, you have to have followers, and leaders create meaning. They don't just boss people around, as a lot of people said. And in order to do it, it has to be meaning for everyone. You can't just say, well, in this little social group, this is what people do. So somebody like the senator talking about a place where there's so many diverse cultures and so many diverse. I live in Silicon Valley, and I think it's even more diverse than Georgia, and it's beautiful. I mean, you get to learn from everybody, and everybody knows so much, and it's so wonderful. And then you see in every group, in every culture, there's problems, and every problem can be solved. And every person who sees a problem and they just say to themselves, I love people. I don't want them to have this problem. I want to do something to make things better. That's how you become a leader. That's how things work. And it's not just my opinion. There's a lot of scientific research that shows this. So open yourself to other professions, to other cultures, to other just every type of person, other attitudes, and you will, what you need after will fall into place. That's the truth.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Ali Rice. Can you unmute, please? Yes.
For me, diversity is a really beautiful thing, and diversification is too. So since I started my business back in 1990, which is 31 years ago, no, 32 years ago, no, 31, sorry. I think one of the things that I've had to do is diversify. And as a leader, and most of my leadership's been in education with young people, but I think the thing is that you have to switch and change. And yeah, it's like sailing the sea, and you have to keep altering the sails to accommodate and evolve and develop programs that meet the needs of the time. So I think the thing is that diversity is a really beautiful thing. And essentially what you need to do is try and problem solve so that people have shared values and shared goals. And I think that's kind of the same kind of locally or globally. And it's the kind of common ground that that brings us together, that helps us, but also that diversity that realizes that there's room for everyone to have different thoughts and opinions and beliefs, and we're still human, and we've still got the same, so it's kind of that common ground kind of brings us together, and the diversity makes us unique. It's our uniqueness that we need to kind of, and those gifts and talents that we all have, and the passion behind whatever we want to do, they're the fire that ignites whatever we do to become leaders in our fields. So yeah.
Thank you. I just want to share just one of my experience, because in 2017 December I lost my father. My father was freedom fighter. My father was a lawyer, highly educated person, but he was very honest. I can remember when my father died, we did not have any single dollar or taka in our bank account. Only me and my younger brothers, we are educated enough. I'm doing my second PhD right now. I'm preparing for my second PhD. Why I'm just thinking about my father. My father always said to me, because I think Sheikh Rahman, you can understand, in our Bangladesh culture and South Asian culture, we respect a lot to our professor, our teachers. So he just shared with me one thing always, that be respectful the elderly people, try to learn from them, and always focus on education. If you do not have any of your friend, education is your best friend. If you can educate yourself enough, if you just focus on education, you can solve many problems. So that is my objective. World Talent Economy Forums, we have School of Talent Economy. It's 100% free. We have Asia Research and Development Institute. It's 100% free. World Talent Economy Forum. It's 100% free for our students. We are developing a lot of educational content, lot of research work. Only the one and only things that I personally believe, education is the key to solve many problems. If we educate enough, then we can solve many problems. So that's why I request always to the government, to the policymaker, to the corporations, whoever join in World Talent Economy Forum, and when we join the other forum and discuss policy level discussions, please invest on your youth community, invest on education. Developing nations need a lot more support from developed nations. We need collaborations. We need partnerships. We need bridging. We have to learn more. Our youth are very talented, very talented. They are amazing talent. I will present from the next sessions. Someone developed autonomous vehicles. Someone developed computers or robots. Someone developed cyber security. Highly talented people from the remote area. So talent is everywhere. So that's why we believe that talent economy, we need to convert it economically. So we need global collaborations. We need partnership from Silicon Valley, from US government, from Europe. All of the developed nations need to support. The more they support, I think we can develop a better community. And by this way, we can solve many problems. Even I as a teacher, I teach Chinese communities, Malaysian community, Indian community, Bangladeshi community, many other peoples. They do not have any difference. They do not know where is the political problem or not. They only believe that they want to move in a positive way. They want to achieve their goal. So everybody invest on education as much as possible. The more you invest on future generation, we will get good return. Thank you, Mr. Sheikh Rahman, Professor Donald, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum, Madam Ali Rice. So thank you. Hopefully your support will help millions of people. So thank you everyone. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.